Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're diving into one of those machines that makes engineers smile, competitors nervous, and politicians pretend they understand innovation. Meet the 1948 Fageol CargoLiner 250HP vehicle, so unusual it looks like someone took a semi-trailer, gave it independence, and said, "Go live your best life." This wasn't just a truck. It was a rebellion on wheels. A rolling experiment that tried to rewrite the rules of logistics. And before we roll any further, hit that subscribe button like you just discovered a prototype nobody else has seen. On this channel, we don't just talk about vehicles, we dig up the weird, the brilliant, and the what were they thinking? Machines that history almost forgot. Now let's rewind to post-war America. The late 1940s were a time when industries were rebuilding, expanding, and experimenting. The trucking world had a problem. Companies needed vehicles that could carry big loads without the complexity and cost of full tractor-trailer setups. Straight trucks were great for city work, but limited in length, around 42 feet, 13 meters in some regions. Meanwhile, semis offered capacity but came with complexity, cost, and the occasional dramatic jackknife moment that made drivers question their life choices. Enter Twin Coach and the Fageol family, engineers who clearly looked at the industry and said, "We can do better," led by Louis J. Fageol, a man who wasn't just an engineer but also a speedboat racer, because apparently designing trucks wasn't exciting enough, the company introduced something radical. The CargoLiner wasn't a truck in the traditional sense. It was a self-propelled trailer with a cab attached to the front, combining the cargo capacity of a semi with the simplicity of a single-unit vehicle. Only one prototype was built, just one. That alone makes it rarer than common sense in political debates. This demonstrator wasn't just for show. It was intended to secure a massive army contract for 1,650 units. The idea behind the CargoLiner was surprisingly logical. The industry needed high-capacity vehicles without the cost disadvantages of low-volume specialty trucks. Semi-trailers dominated because they were cheap to produce at scale. Fageol's solution was to create a single-unit vehicle that could compete in both cost and capability. It was bold, it was clever, and like many brilliant ideas, it scared the competition. Of course, not everything was smooth. Twin Coach was already struggling against giants like General Motors, who were dominating the transit bus market. So instead of backing down, they doubled down and went experimental. That's like being in a boxing match with a heavyweight champion and deciding your best move is to invent a new sport mid-fight. Now let's talk about the engineering, because this thing wasn't just weird. It was smart. Underneath that long trailer-like body sat a unique chassis built around functionality. The body itself was constructed by Fruhoff Trailer Corporation using stainless steel and based on proven trailer designs. So yes, it looked like a trailer because it basically was one, just with ambitions. Power came from underfloor inline engines, producing between 162 and 250 horsepower. That's about 120 to 186 kilowatts, depending on configuration. These engines were mounted beneath the cargo floor, which freed up space and improved weight distribution. The demonstrator used a propane-powered engine from a twin coach bus because nothing says innovation like running your experimental truck on something that sounds like it belongs in a barbecue setup. The steering system was perhaps one of the most interesting features. Up front, the CargoLiner used a dual-wheel steer axle mounted on a bogie, combined with Vickers power steering and Gemma steering gear. Dimensions weren't officially standardized, but based on its trailer-based design, the vehicle stretched close to the limits of straight truck regulations, roughly around 40 to 42 feet in length, or about 12 to 13 meters. And despite that size, it retained the maneuverability advantage of a single-unit vehicle. Fuel capacity was projected at around 401 liters, giving it the range needed for serious hauling. Now, Timmy once saw a picture of the CargoLiner and said, "I could build that." Meanwhile, Bob insists this truck was too advanced for its time, and probably suppressed by aliens who prefer inefficient logistics. But jokes aside, the CargoLiner wasn't just different, it was ahead of its time. When we look at the design philosophy of the 1948 Fageol CargoLiner, it becomes clear this wasn't just a truck, it was an argument against inefficiency, against outdated formats, and maybe even against the idea that this is how it's always been done. The entire concept revolved around integration. Instead of separating tractor and trailer, Fageol merged them into a single flowing structure. The result looked unusual, yes, but it was purposeful. The cab was minimal, almost brutally simple, because the real star was the cargo space. This was a machine built to work, not to impress your neighbor, although ironically, it would absolutely confuse them. With the weight distribution more centralized and no articulation point between tractor and trailer, the vehicle behaved more predictably under braking. Comparing it to the market of the time, the CargoLiner sat in a strange middle ground. Traditional straight trucks were simpler, smaller, and already well understood. Semi-trucks, on the other hand, dominated long-haul freight thanks to mass production and flexibility. The CargoLiner tried to be both, and that was both its greatest strength and its biggest problem. Timmy once said, "If they built more of these, I'd start a trucking company." This is the same man who once got lost in a parking lot with clear signage, so I'm not sure logistics is his calling. But here's the thing, we genuinely have to respect what Fageol attempted. This was not a gimmick. It was a carefully engineered response to real-world challenges in transportation. Now, before we talk about value, let's give this machine the credit it deserves. The CargoLiner represents that rare moment in history when someone looked at a system, everyone accepted and said, "No, we can do better." It didn't follow trends, it tried to create them. As for price, well, here's where things get interesting. Since only one unit was ever built, there was never a true production price in the traditional sense. Development costs were significant, and the intended large-scale military contract could have brought the unit cost down dramatically, likely making it competitive with semis of the time. If it ever appeared at a major event like Meckham Auctions or RM Sotheby's, experts estimate it could easily reach into the high six-figure range, possibly more depending on condition and historical documentation. In today's collector market, rarity plus innovation equals serious money. Huge thanks to all the channel sponsors, you legends. Keep this channel running smoother than a perfectly tuned prototype. Without you, I'd probably be out there reviewing shopping carts and calling them concept vehicles. And to all of you watching, may your ideas be bold, your turns be smooth, and your project